Hey, I'm ZSH Plays, and today I want to show some of the smallest animals in Planet Zoo in a whole new light. We're going to build a natural area for European amphibians next to the lynx habitat to complete our European forest. This is the area we're going to be filling today, with a new path that will take guests from the lynx habitat round to Life in Cold Blood, our reptile and amphibian house, and appropriately enough, it is going to be filled with amphibians that can be found in Europe. What we're focusing on today is a beautiful landscape that's going to complement the forest that we've planted, but also be slightly more structured to lead people through it. And it's inspired by me finally finding something I've been looking for a very long time, which is a real zoo that has exhibit boxes like we have in Planet Zoo. Yes, one does exist. It's in Switzerland, and it has a name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce today, but I'll put it on screen for you. And that is going to be mixed with a really beautiful little exhibit I saw at the Innsbruck Mountain Zoo in Austria, and some of our own ideas. We'll discuss exactly what we're going to do with the exhibit boxes in a minute, but firstly we need to sort out the landscaping. So we've used the vehicle tracks to create a nice smooth gradient in here, and we're going to extend this to the surrounding area. And what we need is to make this landscape sit in properly, because we've got a big rise in the terrain for the lynx habitat, and a slightly smaller one for the wild boar habitat that comes after it. And now we need to get that looking completely natural. So what we're going to have is some retaining walls made from rocks and plants and flowers that look really beautiful, and that's going to tie this area into the next area and get rid of that big hill that suddenly appears out of nowhere for the lynx habitat. We're putting the paths in here, so I've gone for the twilight path, which has got a rustic kind of look to it, and we'll join that up to the sandy dirt path that we've used throughout the forest, and then we'll get our exhibit boxes in. Alright, this is how the area is shaping up. You can see it start to fill in on the drone cam here. Let's get on to the rock work. Almost all of this is going to be built using just two rocks. This tiger rock, and then the same rock again from the temperate set, so we get a slightly different colour. And this is the part that's inspired by the zoo in Innsbruck. It's a really gorgeous little wall, and we're going to recreate it pretty much exactly here. So we're just placing the rocks down with random rotation on, getting them into a vaguely natural kind of look. And then once we've got one layer of them, we're going to start placing them on top of each other. And once we've got 3 layers, that'll be the first part of the wall. And then we can simply take that and continually copy it behind itself, getting higher and higher until we meet up with the terrain that you can see at the back here. It's always tempting to use loads of different rocks, but I find if you just use a few, you can more easily control where they go. And as long as you've got random rotation on, you still get something that looks like a real wall. It doesn't look at all like it's just one rock, really. We'll scatter a few of the faux rocks in as well, just to get a bit of a different size. We'll need some smaller rocks to fill in the gaps between the bigger ones, so it looks like it is going to stand up. And we're going to add little bits of foliage poking out as well. This plant from the Oceania pack is amazing for this kind of stuff, because it's got these really lush green leaves on one side, and then it's got these yellowy brown roots on the other. You can actually use both sides of the plant to make 2 completely different plants, and they look like the kind of plants that you see growing out between the rocks in things like this. And now we've got one section of the wall looking good, we can start copying it around to join it onto the lynx habitat. It's going to be so satisfying when this area is finished. The whole European forest will not only be complete, but it's going to join on perfectly to the reptile and amphibian house. In a future episode, we'll sort out the join to bring it round to the ocelot aviary and then into Africa. We'll use the flatten to surface and smooth tools to get this terrain looking much nicer, and then each time we copy this wall, we're going to get a little higher than the time before until we get up to the top of that terrain there, and then we're going to fill in the gaps with more vegetation so it looks like the land is much more naturally rising up to the level at the top by the lynx habitat. By cutting out different chunks of the original wall that we built, we can make sure that it doesn't look like it's just one piece. And then we can finish off the planting, including a new plant I don't think we've used before, which is the stalks of the daffodils from the America's Animal Pack. They make a nice little grass there, and we'll fill the rest of it in with some buffalo grass. We're going to add a specimen tree in. I think a little apple tree will look nice there. And then finally, we'll fill it all in with some cornflowers and a few other wildflowers, just to add a splash of colour in there. We'll add the flowers and the tree in later, just a couple more pieces of buffalo grass, and then we're going to move on to making the path look really nice. If we zoom out and take a look at it, the path itself looks really nice, but it needs a curb, and the curb on this twilight path is kind of spiky. It's very gothic looking, not really what we're looking for here. So we're going to make our own using a different piece from the twilight pack. This little, I think it's a window ledge. We'll get it to a colour that complements the stone, sink it down into the ground, and then we can just copy it around the whole path, making sure that we adjust the angle of it so it follows the slope as it goes up, and the same here as it goes down. And we'll take this up past the exhibits, finish it off there, and there we go. Path looking much nicer already. Time for a fence. We're going to build a fence that looks different to any that we've built before. It's only going to be 3 pieces, but it's going to look really realistic when it's done. We've got these European marquee beams as the main body of the fence, string for wire, and then the little bracket piece from the America's Animal Pack to secure the wire onto the rest of the fence. And that's it, with a bit of recoloring. That looks really nice. And we can just copy this along the same place that we just put the curbs, and we've got ourselves a very nice fence that looks like it prevents the rocks from falling out, keeps the guests off the rocks, and also adds another layer into the design, which is always a great way of making areas look good. You've got the fence, then the rocks, and then the foliage. This area is already starting to look really good. I love how you can see one of our links in the background there. Let's move on to the rest of the area. At the top of the area, there's a little gap in the path in front of the exhibits. Had to do some serious positioning of these exhibits to get them onto a slope like this, so we're going to cover it up with some of these rocks from the Oceania pack. They match pretty closely in with the Twilight path that we've got here. Once we've got them in and recolored them, that's going to be pretty seamless. There we go. And then on the other side of the exhibits, I want to have a little implied staff path so that the staff would have a way of getting into these exhibits without being on the same path as the guests. So behind the fence, we're just going to use the mud panels coloured to look like sand, so we can separate this one path into what looks like two paths. These mud panels are absolutely brilliant for covering up any wonky Planet Zoo pathing, because you can make them look pretty much exactly like sand. With that done, it's time to add the animals and start working on the exhibits themselves. We're going to have 3 species in this area, and we're going to add the first 2 of them now, the Crested Newts and the Fire Salamander. The Crested Newts live in what's effectively an aquarium, although there's a little bit of land in the middle, so I guess it's a paludarium, and it's little aquatic exhibits like this that I saw in the zoo which inspired this build. The Fire Salamanders have a lot more land in theirs, of course, being salamanders rather than newts. And we're going to customize the exhibit boxes, taking some inspiration from the real zoo and then adding some of our own touches as well. We'll start with my favorite piece in the game, the bronze sculpture plinth, which is what we use to make the entrance to this zoo. We're going to use this to make the base of the exhibits look much more attractive. That beautiful weathered texture on the bronze just looks amazing. The color really complements the rocks that are below it and then the green water above it. And for the tops of the exhibits, we're going to take inspiration from the real zoo, because that was a very basic metal construction, nothing too fancy, but it just allows us to cover up the tops of these exhibit boxes with something fresh, so it doesn't just look like a Planet Zoo exhibit box anymore. We're going to use both sides of this Twilight piece because of the rivets on one side and lack of them on the other, so we can get a nice texture on there, and we'll use that same piece to create the sides of the exhibit as well. If my math is correct, these exhibit boxes have a volume of 64 cubic meters, and with quite a lot of water in there, and then all the lighting rig at the top as well, I feel like just having glass with no supports at the sides is stretching credibility, though feel free to correct both my maths and engineering knowledge in the comments if you know better. But once we've got these in at the side, I think it looks a lot more sturdy, and it just adds some more detail to it as well. And we'll use some of those America Pack pieces as well to add a few extra nuts and bolts on there. Frontier seem to have started doing a real mixture of very heavily themed pieces which aren't really my bag, and then really small generic pieces that are absolutely vital for building going forward. We'll also add in one of the aquatic lights so we can get a bit more brightness in here. We'll put one of Lion's signs on the front and then customize it so it's nice and flat up against the glass. I don't know where we'd be without these signs. The creativity to make these in the first place still blows my mind. And then finally for the structure, we'll add some more brackets on as well. That's just a little detail I saw at the zoo in Switzerland, which I liked. I think I'm happy with the outside now. Just got one little thing I want to do on the inside, which is add some ivy to this tree. And then we'll move on to the other set of exhibits, which is going to be slightly different. We are pretty short on native European amphibians in this game, but we do have another amphibian that is found in Europe, even though it shouldn't be, and that is the American bullfrog. This is an invasive species throughout much of Europe. I thought it'd be really interesting to have a separate exhibit for those, with some education for the guests, all about invasive species and the effects that they can have on ecosystems. So we're going to build a little frog house here, separated off from the native species, with a cute little rock display in front of it, which we're just making here using the mud pillar technique, and this is where the American bullfrogs are going to live. I've spun a section of the rocks that we created earlier around the mud pillar to create a very roughly circular pile of rocks, and then we'll use the same technique to create a concrete base and top for it, and then use the same technique again to spin some mesh around it. And then all we need to do is make sure that none of the rocks are poking through the mesh, and we'll get this seamless and rather cute little display with a couple of plants on top that will sit outside the little sheltered area where the bullfrogs go. One of the things I want to achieve in this episode, as well as creating this area which feels like it's part of the forest whilst also having its own identity, is to try and get some amazing shots of these exhibit animals for the end of the video. I feel like they always get shortchanged in Planet Zoo because of the limitations of the boxes that they're in and the fact that they're on little random animation loops rather than being, in some respects, alive like the habitat animals. So I'm going to be spending a very long time stretching the cinematic camera to its limits to try and get some proper close-up shots of all the little animals in this area living their little lives. I want BBC Nature Unit standard cinematics at the end of this episode, so we will see if we can achieve that or not. That's the basics of the little frog house done. Now it's time to make it look attractive. So we're going to have this orange panel in front of it with loads of information about the animals on it, and then we're going to put a roof in, and we'll have this looking like it's balanced on top of these plaster pieces with some columns next to them. I wanted something thinner than these plaster pieces, so I'm going to replace those with one of the classic sculpture pieces here. They've got rounded edges and the flexi-color, so we can basically get the same effects that we had with the plaster panels, but with a little round edge to it, which looks much nicer, and they're thinner, so they fit in better with the metal columns that we've got next to it. These exhibits are facing the sun, so we need something in front of them to keep them in the shade so we don't get glare on the glass. The other exhibits have the sun behind them, so the viewing is going to be really good into there anyway. Just move them up a bit so we've got a clear gap between them and the floor. This little house is heavily inspired by one at the Innsbruck Mountain Zoo. I'm not actually sure what animals they've got in there. I think there are newts, but it'll do just as well for our bullfrogs. And then we'll add some extra detailing and some signage using more of lion signs. This time I've extracted just the lettering and design from them, so we can just paste those onto this wall here. We'll add some more structure and detailing with a couple of different pieces here, and then we'll move on to finishing off the exhibit box part of it. Firstly, we're going to create a join between the glass and the rest of the building using some girder pieces. This will ensure that the glass isn't just disappearing into the concrete, so it looks like it's actually fixed into something. And the black girders provide a nice contrast with the light grey of the building as well. And then we're going to recreate something I saw in the real exhibit, which I really liked, which is kind of almost like a Venetian blind effect at the top of the glass. We're going to do that using the European cast iron fence post, which is basically the same piece as the marquee beam that we used earlier, but a little thinner, so it's going to work better for this particular part of it. We'll just completely fill the space with those, and then we'll delete every second one of them, and that will give us the Venetian blind effects that we're looking for. We'll copy these across to fill the space, and then we'll add some more concrete in above them to reduce the size of the glass. I don't think an American bullfrog really needs 4 meters of vertical space. And then finally, we'll add grunge decals all over the building to make it feel like it's been here for a while and look more realistic. And that's the building finished. We are not quite finished though. We've got one more thing to do before we can declare the European forest complete, and that is sort out this path from the new area we've just created down to the reptile and amphibian house, as well as all the usual stuff like adding in a hedgerow, more rocks, plants, grass, etc., just to make everything feel complete. I want to make this long side of the reptile and amphibian house look more exciting, so people have got something to look at as they walk past it to get to the entrance. What we're going to do is create a mural. So on this wall we're going to place every single one of the relevant signs that we've got for the animals that are held within this house. Then we're going to copy across the sign that we made for the front of the house, and then finally we'll pick our favourites of the little signs and create a mural that surrounds this text, just something that looks cute and would make people want to come in this house, check out the Asian water monitor, the axolotl, the tree frogs, and the spectacled caiman, and all the other animals that we've got in there. It's a shame the diamondback terrapin signs are so huge because they are really cute, but they're just going to make everything look out of scale if we use those, so we'll just concentrate on these smaller signs that go nicely together here, and once we've got those into the positions that we want, there we go, it's done. We'll jump up into the drone cam, take a look at the whole European forest, and then we'll dive on in to the new area. Here we go. Pleased with that signage. I think that looks really classy. The shade on these exhibit boxes is pleasing as well. I think each one of the exhibits has its own identity, which, considering they're all just exhibit boxes, is pretty good. Here's the whole area. Time to take a look at the animals. This was not fun to film, but I am really pleased with the final results. Here we are inside the Fire Salamander exhibit, and here's the Danube Crested Newt. Particularly like this shot where we've got the 2 newts at the same time. You really have to fill these exhibit boxes to the max or past the max to get the visibility on the animals that you want, but it can look really good when you do that, especially if you manage to get a newt sitting on their log. How good does that look? Let's check out our invasive friends here, the American bullfrogs. They do not do a lot of swimming, but I managed to catch this one. And there we go. That is the entire amphibians area and the end of the European forest. I've had a lot of fun doing an exhibit build again after quite a long time. Let's check out our progress today. This is where we started today, and this is where we are now. Really hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I think this is definitely one of my favourite areas we've ever built on the channel. Thanks for watching as always. Thank you so much to all of you who've joined the Explorers Club. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name up here, and I'll see you again next week for some more Planet Zoo.